Okay, starting. Okay, welcome everyone to the cert-manager bi-weekly meeting. It's the 25th of January 2024. We've got a pretty light agenda today and a pretty light showing of people with the cameras on. So I guess you just get to look at me. The thing we've been doing recently is starting with a 5-minute announcement and shout-out section, which has been a hit. Thanks to Peter for suggesting that. I will leap into that as the first person who's here with an agenda item, but it actually covers the top two, which is the releases of cert-manager 1.14's alpha and beta. So I released the beta on Monday this week. The alpha was released last week, I think. So we're now in feature freeze, and we should be on target to release on the 31st of January as scheduled, after we pushed it back due to the new year. So anyone who watches this, go test the beta, go see what happens. There's a lot to look forward to in cert-manager's future, let's say that. The other item that's assigned to me on the announcement section is Trust Manager 0.8, which is a cool thing to have out there. I think the coolest thing about it, apart from all the awesome community contributions, which there are so many of for Trust Manager, we're officially sort of moving towards Trust Manager v1. It's going to be a fairly long road because we have to move the CRDs from alpha, which they currently are. We're probably going to rename the CRD. There's other things going on there. But, you know, the plan is in motion, and that's an important step. And one of those steps is that we've now registered trust-manager.dev as the official Trust Manager domain. It doesn't work yet, but we didn't really announce that publicly, so no one could steal the domain before we registered it. So at some point soon, there will be a Trust Manager website, even if it just redirects to the current cert-manager website. The only other person here who has a item in the announcements is Tim, so I'll hand the microphone over to him.
Yes. This week we have done a couple more releases, and in the previous weeks we also have done some additional releases. To quickly go over them, let's start with Google CAS Issuer. This is an issuer that integrates with the Google CAS solution. It's currently still hosted under the JetStack organization on GitHub, but we have plans to change that. This latest release of the issuer is now based on the issuer library, which is a great new library that we built to more easily create issuers. Some other releases that we have done more recently are a alpha release of istio-csr and an alpha release of approved policy. Both contain some bug fixes, but they are also based on the new makefile module system, which means that a lot of the like CI/CD is very similar now for these different projects, and like it's all centralized. And for istio-csr, this also means that now the release process is fully automated in GitHub, which wasn't the case before. So that's great stuff, and we hope that very soon we can do a full release of both istio-csr and approved policy.
Yeah, the makefile module stuff has been a lot of work and is still a work in progress, but it's definitely looking a lot better already, having that stuff in there. It's really coming along. It's awesome to see. So thanks for the update, Tim. So Jeff, you're the one tagged on the agenda with an istio-csr issue. Would you like to introduce us to it, or?
Yeah, definitely. And this is going to be me and Mr. Furman here. We're working on this together. We're from Charter Communications, and we're trying to implement Istio Service Mesh in our internal Kubernetes as a service platform. And we've got HashiCorp Vault set up as our certificate authority. And we've integrated that so far with istio-csr. and the certificate authority has some constraints, specifically like the subject fields, the country, the state, etc. And the issue we're running into is istio-csr is sending like wildcard, like star values for those subject fields by default. And we weren't sure if there's a way to change that, and if so, how to change it. Josh can speak more to what he tried to do. We tried to change some things in the CRD. We didn't get it to work, so we ended up having to write a mutating webhook to catch the response and then change the wildcards to the values we actually needed. So I don't know if this was an existing issue or if you guys could shine some light on what we might be doing wrong here.
Sure, thanks for the introduction. Great to have you both here, by the way. I should say that at the start. It's always great to see people join the call. I've got to say, for myself, as designated host for the day, istio-csr is not my speciality by any means. So, if there is a setting for this, which I don't think there is, then it's entirely possible that I wouldn't know about it. That said, I really don't think that does exist, and this would be net new code to implement. Can anyone confirm what I just said? I think it looks like Tim might be looking at the code as we speak to try and work it out.
Yeah, so I can provide just a little bit more background. So we noticed cert-manager, works by you create your certificate resource, and then the CSR or your certificate request resource is then generated based off of that. So like Jeff mentioned, we wrote a mutating webhook to kind of hijack the certificate resource. So whenever a certificate resource is created, populate those subject fields as we need them. But it turned out, I guess, istio-csr is skipping the certificate resource altogether, and it generates a certificate request resource. And so, our mutating webhook kind of, I guess you could call it a little hack, just wasn't working right because it was only operating on certificate resources. And yeah, there was no obvious way for us to kind of update those values through istio-csr. So yeah, that's why we're here.
Yeah, I think one thing I can share is on the website we have some diagrams that kind of show the different flows of resources. So indeed, if you look at istio-csr, you look at the man on top, and then you follow the arrow, it goes to service mesh and then certificate request. So it doesn't go through the certificate resource option, which is the case when you use like ingress resources or directly create certificates. So you're definitely right there, like your mutating webhook won't apply to what you're doing with istio-csr. But what is your webhook doing? It's adding subject fields, is that correct?
So how we had set it up is just basically the mutating webhook will look for any creation of the certificate resource, and then just patch the fields that we needed with our, the values that correspond to our Vault instance. But it looks like certificate request resources don't expose those values. So I even took, base64 decoded what is in the certificate request resource, and then it, showed the certificate request. I tried to decode, what was in that, but it was encrypted, so we couldn't really see, anything inside.
It's not encrypted. It's ASN1, I think, and then it's signed. So that is your problem. You could actually change it, but the signature will break. And then I think the Vault issuer will actually start complaining because the signature doesn't work anymore. So I don't think you can alter the the certificate request because it is signed. What you can do is you can alter the behavior of istio-csr such that, well, I'm not saying like you can do it right now. I'm saying like that's possible technically to, let's say, you reprogram istio-csr and you make it so that it changes certain fields when it creates the certificate request. Because istio-csr will have control of the private key, so it will create this certificate request resource for you with these properties.
I've been looking at the istio-csr code and documentation to try and refresh my memory on this. My understanding of it, and I could be wrong, is actually that these certificate requests are coming from Istio. So ultimately, what we can do is actually quite limited. I don't know if we can make a change. So a certificate request, as Tim mentioned, has to be signed by the private key that is requesting a new certificate. So that's generated somewhere. And if you're using a cert-manager certificate, that will be generated by cert-manager and managed within your cluster. I think what may be happening here is that Istio generates that. And if that is the case, we can't change anything about it, and it would have to be passed by Istio directly, and then we would, like, so basically the cert-manager issuer in this case is just the sort of intermediary thing that is getting the certificate signed, and it's actually Istio that generates all of this. Does that match your expectation?
Yeah, so yeah, I understand that. But we're running into a case where the documentation is very explicit that istio-csr needs to be deployed prior to Istio. So we are unable to even get istio-csr deployed because it attempts to do an initial certificate, and that's where it's populating these fields with wildcards that we cannot have. So we're not even getting to Istio. We are stuck at istio-csr, and we have cert-manager by itself working. We can issue certs, everything works all fine, but it's just the istio-csr portion is what is giving us troubles.
Yeah, sorry, I hadn't made that connection. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Obviously, that there is a different certificate, like an initial certificate that's created, and that's a different thing. Yeah, that we do control and that we do generate. So it would be code to change it, because as far as I know, there is no configuration option to change it. But I don't think that certificate's format has any particular requirements, as far as I know. So I don't see why we couldn't expose options that would allow you to configure that, which I guess would be in the Helm chart. But ultimately, like, I don't see a reason for that certificate specifically why we couldn't change things. But yeah, it would be new code, as I understand it.
Let me quickly share my screen. So I think what you might be talking about is this istio-d certificate that's included in the Helm chart. Is that correct? Because that is the certificate that should be created when we deploy istio-csr.
Sure. So, like, an interesting thing on that, and we looked into this, and in the spec field, there is no, there's no subject, localities, countries, etc. exposed here. So, obviously it could be added, whatever, but there seems to be, some situation where this certificate, like, we have a mutating webhook that patches certificate resources, and we've pretty thoroughly validated that mutating webhook works. But whenever we install istio-csr, wherever this certificate that we were just looking at on your screen gets created, it's just never picked up by our mutating webhook. It's always given, those wildcard values, and it was hard for us to understand where those were coming from or being set.
Okay, yeah, that's very strange, because this should just be a certificate that's created. I think these are also the right API versions, that kind of stuff. I wouldn't see how this could circumvent the webhook. I'm not sure if Ash or Adam.
Yeah, it's also like interesting when we deploy istio-csr, we actually aren't seeing certificate resources being created at all. We just see a certificate request resource created.
That makes sense. I mean, so there are two things here, right? This is the certificate resource that's created to create this istio-d certificate, which is used, I think, to serve the istio-csr gRPC endpoint. And then,
Oh, I see.
And then istio contacts that gRPC endpoint with certificate requests, and basically tells istio-csr, okay, request these certificates for me. Then istio-csr requests the certificates using the Kubernetes API, but it does that directly by using certificate request resources instead of certificate resources. So there are two things here. This certificate, which is a certificate resource, and then all the certificate requests that are created when the gRPC endpoint is called, basically. So
Sure,
this certificate should normally adhere to, or like be picked up by your webhook. That would be very strange if it wasn't picked up by your webhook. All the certificate requests that are created at runtime, those won't be picked up by your webhook.
I'm actually noticing, I think I might have had, like a leftover secret named istio-d TLS. So I think maybe upon subsequent deployments of Istio, it was seeing the secret was already there and then not generating the certificate request. So that's okay. I understand that now. But I guess we're still kind of stuck in that certificate request kind of deadlock, not being able to update those values for those.
Yeah, so there I think what Ash was saying is pretty important. It might be that we don't control what's in the signed portion of the certificate request, because we actually get that from Istio itself. I don't know exactly how it works. It might be that the gRPC endpoint receives all the properties of the certificate, or it might be that it receives the full CSR. It kind of depends on where the private key is actually kept. I guess it's kept by Istio. So I assume Ash is correct that when he says that you get full signed CSR blob through the gRPC endpoint. So that means that you will have to alter your Istio setup so that Istio requests certificates that adhere to your fault policy, basically.
Sure. Yeah, so that makes sense. But yeah, kind of like I was saying before, like we have not even gotten to Istio itself, right? Like we are in a place where we cannot get Istio CSR deployed. Anytime we deploy it, it generates a certificate request, wild carding the subject values, and the deployment fails. Like the Istio CSR pod will not come up. So I understand that istio-d is what actually formulates those certificate requests. But there seems to be something happening on the Istio CSR portion for generating some initial certificate request. And there's just no way to update the values that we're speaking of.
Just as a quick sanity check, have you seen any other certificate resource that's able to issue from this vault issuer successfully using the respective parameters? So that we know that that's known good then.
Yeah, so I've issued at least like 10, 15 certificates, manually at this point using the same issuer that we're connecting Istio CSR to. So we're fairly certain that our vault and cert-manager itself are configured correctly, but the Istio CSR portion is where we're getting the hang up.
For sure, yeah. I just wanted to make absolutely sure. It's always good to check.
Sure. We want to be on the same page.
Yeah.
I've linked to some code. I think this is maybe what is tripping it up. You see, it generates a CSR at the top with those cert options, and then signs the CSR at the bottom. And I can't see. I think this is the one that used for the server, the one that was initially signed. So this is used. This is the TLS logo used by the server. It's renewed every so often. I think this is what creates the initial certificate. And you can see at the top, it just generates a CSR for itself and then goes through the normal flow.
Sure.
Oh, so Tim, in the this certificate Helm template you were showing earlier, is this even enabled? Like, there's an enable option at the top. Is this on? Do we know? In your environment?
It says it's on here, but I do remember, like, I also wrote this README here at some points when I looked into istio-csr more, and I do remember seeing that first it does actually request a certificate for its TLS, for its gRPC server actually, but I wonder then what the other certificate is for. That is in its, like, what the certificate in its Helm chart is for, since we already request one dynamically too. Does that make sense? So maybe we're overlooking here something here, because it seems like it needs 2 certificates on started.
There's something suspicious, yeah.
This is called istio-d. It's not called istio-csr or whatever. Maybe this is a certificate for istio.
I think there's a lot of people on this call furiously reading code right now, trying to work out what's going on.
I think it's a code block I've linked. That is it, because that PKI util is the istio PKI util, so it's generating a certificate with the same flow as all the istio ones using the certificate request, not certificate, but it's generating the CSR itself. And I can't see a way to specify those extended options that you need to specify for your particular setup. So I think that's probably what we need to add, or someone needs to add, is the ability for us to specify those options.
So that would be a change in istio itself.
Yeah.
Well,
oh, you can set the org. That's not all of them, but you can set the org.
Oh, you mean the cert options property?
So yeah, you guys need to do more than just the org, though, right?
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure that what is it, the X509, maybe I'm getting that wrong, but that object, I believe, or struct, does expose the full subject fields like locality, province, et cetera, more than just organization.
Yeah.
I can't remember where I saw that before.
So in Go, it does. We're using this this library, this PKI util, which comes from istio, which gives us this subset of fields.
And to be honest, I don't know why we're using this.
I think the idea is that we use the exact same code to sign certificates for istio and ourselves. Like, on the surface, isn't that insane? It's just that it means that we're falling into this where we can't set those extra stuff.
But this does narrow things down because given this, like you can see on line 311 there, that we do actually have access to the private key because that's being returned from Istio. That means we can change it. We can, like, if we have that control, we can do. Theoretically, we could generate a different certificate. And
you don't have to use their util to generate the certificate signing request at all.
Exactly.
We can generate a certificate signing request of our own.
So that could be an option that would work for you guys if Istio doesn't expose enough configuration options for you in your environment. We could just do it ourselves, and like we certainly can generate a certificate with anything in it. In this case, we can't do it for the Istio client workload certs, but we can for this.
It does pose the question: is this the library that Istio uses to generate its certificate signing requests? Is it going to be able to specify the fields you need for its for your?
Yeah.
I was thinking the same thing. Like, if Istio isn't able to issue these certificates, then there's no use for us to add this.
I know Vault can ignore something to the CSR and give to them anyway. But
what does gen CSR do? It generates.
it takes
key,
just
creates a CSR.
Yeah.
I mean, Vault can also issue certificates without, like, it can set the subject on a certificate it issues. It doesn't have to require that a certain subject is set in the CSR, basically.
Yeah, I believe you can tell it to ignore certain CSR fields and just do predefined behavior.
You were also talking about like wildcard certificates, right?
When we decode the certificate request, we saw wildcards set for those fields, which we would not want to change our Vault CA to allow wildcards. Our corporate policy is pretty strict to only allow. Like, our corporate domain and defined subject fields have to be in every search.
So let's just trace this variable back as it's doing, and see where that's coming from.
So I also sent a link to a X509 subject struct that's defined in cert-manager, and it does expose those fields that we do need to.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If we were using cert-manager to issue the cert instead, we would be able to use that. But this is Istio's.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see. Okay.
But
where does this come from?
A potential solution, as I say, is that we could just not use STOs and use cert managers, and then we do have control over all of this if we want.
Comes from a flag, Tim.
Okay.
Linky link.
Thanks. Another thing that you could do is you could configure Vault so that it ignores the contents of your CSR and basically just issues a non-wildcard certificate. But I'm not sure, it might be quite complex to set it up. But that could definitely be an option. Oh, but this is not a wildcard certificate. Maybe it's overwritten in the Helm chart.
That's what I'm doing now. I'm just going backwards through it.
Could I just confirm, Joshua and Jeff, when you're saying wildcard, that's in the organizations field in the other subject, is it, or is this in the DNS names?
So I've seen it set in the common name and then each subject field. So province, organization, locality, postal code, etc.
So I think maybe Tim might be on a bit of a red herring here. Like this isn't relating to what domains the certificate is valid for. It's relating to what's in the CSR is being requested. I should imagine that what we need to change is what goes into those fields so that those are right for you guys, and that's not like the wildcard. The asterisk that's in there is probably just some implementation detail or an artifact of how you're dumping out the cert or something. I think it might be a red herring.
Normally, like when I read this, I expect the subject to be empty, basically.
Yeah,
Maybe-
so like our errors that we're receiving from our Vault instance, our API errors, write out star value for comma name does not match the regex we have set up. And that's the same for all the different subjects. So it seems to be sending the request with wildcards populated in those fields.
So if there's something in the if there's an asterisk, like I'm gonna say asterisk rather than wildcard because wildcard can have a meaning with DNS names. So if there's an asterisk in there, that would be surprising to me because as far as I can see, only the organization is set in the Istio code that we're dealing with. So I'm wondering if those wildcards are actually asterisks. I just said I was going to say that. If those asterisks might actually be Vault saying that there wasn't anything there, like rather than printing nothing, it's saying something.
I mean, since it isn't actually being signed, do you have that certificate signing request, so we could pump it through OpenSSL and see what comes out? Because the easiest way to check this is to take the certificate signing request, pump it through OpenSSL rec-text-in, whatever, and it will print out it should print out the information that's contained within. Ooh,
That looks like it truncated it. Fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Sorry.
It's all good.
I guess what's the best way to get this to you guys?
Pastebin.
If you can paste the rest of it, like
yeah. So I copied it all, but it seemed to truncate.
Sorry, if Pastebin's easier. Or this this is for.
This is a request, not a certificate, so it'll be OpenSSL rec in rather than X509 in, I believe. My OpenSSL foo is rusty.
Yeah, it will be rec, but this might not be the tool. If you do CSR decode online rather than X509, CSRs are actually a different standard because of course they are. There you are. So that's not the full thing. That's just what was in. Yeah,
it'll end with another dash line saying end. See it because it's pen encoded. If you just whack it on I don't know. If you can't send files via this, I don't know if you can send files via this. Just I don't know.
You can send the second part if you want.
Yeah, just send it in halves or Pastebin or. I mean, I'm also Adam Talbot on the Kubernetes Slack. You can just DM me. Or Tim or Ash. Pick one.
Hi. It's funny how, in many ways, tech is so advanced.
Yeah.
Josh, I think we're missing the last line on that CSR. There should be like a dash and certificate request.
Yeah. So we're missing a lot because I'm copying the whole thing, and when I paste it in the chat, it is truncated. So Google Meet is truncating the message itself.
Just are you on the Kubernetes?
Can you share your screen? Yeah, or Kubernetes Slack. Or you could share your screen and post in a decoder as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just the easiest because I don't know how to do this, how to send it to you guys. So
definitely.
I shared
what was that?
I shared the link with you, so you can use a link to decode it.
Of course, I have to update system settings.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I actually might not be able to share because it's asking me to.
I think you can share Chrome.
There we go.
Where your actual desktop.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
Just hit decode.
Hit decode, see what happens.
So this is our actual request.
So
Yeah, so there's nothing in there. This matches what we would expect from Istio's code, that the organization is empty and nothing else is set. So I won't worry about that warning. It's not hugely relevant. But what this says is there is nothing in the subject that's been set apart from an
Right.
empty organization. So certainly, so that narrows it right down. Now we know exactly where the cert is coming from. We know how it's being populated, and we know that's Istio's code, not ours. So the remaining thing now is to get the correct values in there that will pass your validation check. Although, as was said earlier, probably the certs that Istio then sends to be signed will then start to fail because they're using the same code. But like to get past this problem would require a code change. It's that code block that Adam linked to earlier, and we'd have to change that for our own code, or else we'd have to change Istio's upstream code and then update our libraries to point at that, which is probably not likely.
I'm not sure if that is the simplest solution. I would alter your vault configuration so it sets the subjects to a certain value, a fixed value, regardless of what the CSR value is, if that makes sense.
You guys said you didn't want to change vault, right?
Yeah, Jeff can speak more to that. He's kind of the vault guy.
Yeah, so when the certificate request resource gets to vault, it doesn't show empty. It shows that the subject had star, like just the star character. If it is empty, then vault will absolutely populate those values, but that's not the error message we're seeing. I don't know if you have one of those handy, Josh, that shows like the 400 bad request response.
Yeah.
Because it
Yeah, I got
says
one.
that the request had a star. So vault won't overwrite things if there's like a star in the subject. But if it's empty, then vault will go ahead and populate what's pre-configured.
So that lines up with what we've just seen on the screen share there. Like the subject is not empty. There is a subject there with an organization that is empty. So an organization is an array, and it's an array of 0 strings at this point, or it's an array of 1 empty string. So it's not empty, but the end result is still the same in that case. That we can't change that.
If we looking at Istio's code, on the options substruct, there's a field called is dual use, which means it will set the domain not only as a SAN but also as the subject name. So by setting that to true, it wouldn't give you an empty field anymore. Do you want me to share?
It would. I think
thought it was just organization that was used.
It will still have the organization in it, as I understand. So in this code, it's still unconditionally setting the organization.
Dual use common name. I see that.
Yeah, it's unconditionally setting the organization. But the empty subject, if that's a problem, that can be fixed with a one-line code change to is dual use equals true in our code.
The organization is in the subject, though.
Oh, by subject, I mean the common name, sorry.
The common name's also in the subject.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird, the Istio's code, that I think they should not add like empty string in the organization array. That's kind of weird, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like Vault should be able to figure out, okay, this is actually empty, even though it has like empty string as a subject, organization subject.
I think the star in the error message might just be a bullet point.
Yeah.
As in, like,
error messages.
Yeah, it's an error that's an aggregate error message containing one error. In fact, is that a double space after name?
It looks like it, doesn't it?
It is. So I'm guessing it's trying to put it there, and it's empty.
Oh, okay. Now I understand what you were saying, Adam. I didn't see the error message. So common name doesn't match regex.
Yeah, I think it's common name, and because it's got a double space, it's printing an empty string there, and then doesn't match regex. So in order to fix that error message, a code change to our code we could set is dual use to true, and that would mean the CSR generated would have a common name and a subject alternate name set, I think.
So
Basically,
you guys are saying the star that we're seeing in front of common name in this error is not actually the value of the common name. It's simulating a bullet point.
yeah, because if you look at this isn't errors, and then it's got a list. In fact, let me just Google.
That makes a lot more sense.
I think it's definitely something I've seen before.
Yeah, so if I just Googled code for 100 errors, and like you can see Stack Overflow, it's a different error message, but they've got the same star at the start of their error. So I'm guessing I'm pretty confident that's just a bullet point.
Yeah. But if you change the policy to also allow like empty common names, it should work. So now the common name always has to match charter.com.
I'm now seeing what you mean, Adam.
What I mean by which part of what I mean? So many words.
The dual
use. Dual use, yeah.
Yeah, you follow that variable through it. It sets it.
But is there a reason, Jeff, I think it was, is there a reason that you set or that you require the common name to match these reg expressions? Or could
that's the corporate policy. Our corporate policy won't approve us to set an empty common name.
That's what you get as input, right? So afterwards you will still, you can still set another value if it's empty.
I don't know if we could set the value for the common name vault, but we can for the subject, the locality, provenance. We can set those because those are always going to be the same. But vault can't override the common name, so it sees the request, it's empty, it checks the corporate policy, which is stored in Venafi, and it says no go because it's empty.
Okay. Yeah. So you want a dynamic common name that matches the SAM basically, and you cannot let vaults generate it automatically because it depends on the SAM value.
Right. Yep.
Okay.
And I don't know if Vault has that functionality, even if it wasn't for the corporate policy. I don't know if Vault can fill in the common name. I know it has an option to put the common name as one of the SANs, but not the other way. Like it can't put a SANs as the common name.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, I think we have all the argumentation for the feature.
Sorry. The only option is require CN, which tells Vault that the CN is completely optional. That plus validation means it only be allowed empty or valid.
Yeah, but even if you like later want to have these certificates with a certain common name, for whatever reason, it won't be possible to dynamically set a common name. So it's still a problem, even though it passes validation. Your certificate's still not how you want it to be. That makes sense. But yeah, I think we probably have all the argumentation for adding this as a feature.
I think
write it down and
which is quite an issue that we want to actually specify common name using that flag. I don't know if we also want to expose the org as well as a flag.
I guess it wouldn't be needed in this case, right? That can be autofilled.
Yeah. So the main thing is that one line change to that structure. The cert config struct used is still used true.
I'm uneasy about that, to be honest. It's the place where the dual use would be picked takes it from the sans, and if you have one of them if the first one that's picked is too long, it will just fail. So if we set this by default, it would be potentially breaking to anyone that's currently using istio-csr. And if we set it as an option, then it's really specific and weird.
Yeah,
but it might be the best thing to have it as an option.
People running istio-csr are likely running in cluster, likely through Helm, and so likely don't have actually, yeah, Kubernetes services can get really long names if you include cluster.local.
Yeah, we certainly, if we add this, we cannot default it on. It has to be an option, 100%. Like out of the question to have it as a default, I think. But if we expose it, then I suppose that's fine. If you guys want to turn it on and it works, it may well just break down the road if your DNS names get long enough. But that
there's also the option that we don't use the istio library to generate CSR, and we just use our own library to generate CSR and do same things, and we can make it almost behave exactly the same and just give you the option to flag the common name, which may be a better user experience in that you could just specify a Helm value or flag for your common name for that certificate, and it will just work.
Because if we use the cluster domain name, or the service domain name, sorry, service DNS name, whatever, then it won't match that regex, right? Because it will be like close to local.
Yeah.
Or I'm not sure, like maybe you have some DNS setup in your cluster that is charted labs, something like that.
I think it would be, you'd want it to be if you were automatically setting it, it'd probably be one of the sans, but as I said, you don't want, that could potentially break things over a certain garage limit. So just leave it in the hands of the users and make common name configurable would probably be the best user experience, but the biggest code change.
Okay, I'm conscious of time. Joshua and Jeff, are you sort of following what we're saying here? Like, does this make sense?
It does to me, and that's like the intuitive functionality that I would expect. There would be some flag in the values that could be set.
If it makes sense to you, like I think the next step is certainly to summarize what we've been discussing in the issue that you've raised. Tim or Adam, one of you able to summarize it for the issue, maybe?
How do you want it spelled correctly? I can do it if you don't want it spelled correctly.
Fine if there's a few typos, as long as it's understandable.
You're speaking my language. Yeah, I'll have we got a link to the issue in the chat, just so I've not got a tab open.
It was,
yeah, I think it was at the top.
It's in the doc, certainly. It's
244.
244.
Yeah. So yeah, first step is, if we summarize it in there, we don't and can't generally make promises about timelines and how things get implemented and anything like that, for many reasons. It's an open source project. If you were willing, able to contribute code, we'd certainly be able to review. Do you think you'd be able to contribute this as a feature, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm pretty down to give it a try with Jeff. I think we can probably get something together, at least between the two of us. So,
I mean, if you'd like to contribute code, then there's definitely people able to review. We've actually we're onboarding a new reviewer for istio-csr as well. So hopefully, it should get reviewed pretty timely. And like this seems like a fairly clear cut request, so it should be pretty clear what goes into this, I suppose. It's got a good
reviewer.
Peter.
Okay. Isn't Hussam also interested?
It may have been Hussam, yeah, but it's either Peter or Hussam, one of them.
Okay, one of the series.
Yeah. So yeah, if users are willing to contribute and it's summarizing the issue and it's all clear, like certainly I think we're all agreed that it's a thing that we would like to change. It makes sense to change it. So with that in mind, like I think we've got everything we need to move forward with this if we're all in agreement.
Yeah.
Yep. Sounds good.
Yeah, I think that sounds good.
Excellent. Well, in that case, as we're coming towards time, I'll start to wrap it up. So thank you again, Joshua and Jeff, for joining. It's always awesome. It's always awesome to get to be able to work with people as well on code and get things merged. So we'll keep an eye out. Please, on Kubernetes Slack in the cert-manager dev channel, please feel free to ping people and ask for reviews and things, just to get more eyes on it if you raise a PR. I'll sign off on the video. So thank you everyone for joining. I'll stop the recording. Goodbye, YouTube.